everyone, I'm Maki. Do you like mobile suits called Blue? The Blue Destiny from the Universal Century series is one of the most popular. The Zeroid Bird 2 Blue Wind is a mobile suit operated by space pirates. This time, I'll be introducing the Forbidden Blue. It is a mobile suit born from the Seed series project called Mobile Suit Variation. It also appears in the spin-off series Astray. As its name suggests, it is connected to the Forbidden Gundam. In fact, the Forbidden Blue is another machine that has had a strange journey. Let's unravel its charm together. Please support my channel by subscribing for just 99 cents a month. In return, you will receive comment stamps and a badge for your name. Now, let's begin our research. In the 70th year of the Cosmic Era, a major war broke out between the Earth Alliance and Plant. The Earth Alliance forces continue to suffer major defeats at the hands of Zaft's underwater mobile suits. With their outdated weapons, it was extremely difficult to defeat the mobile suits. For the Earth Alliance forces, whose naval strengths comprised not only regular warships, but also many submarines, Zaft's underwater mobile suits including the Gundam posed a significant threat. Furthermore, the deployment of neutron jammers rendered the latest nuclear-powered warships and precision-guided weapons ineffective. The Alliance Navy was forced to oppose Zaft with only outdated naval forces and was practically powerless. Cosmic Era 71. At last, the Earth Alliance forces succeeded in developing mobile suits for their own military use. The G8TX series of mobile suits displayed astonishing performance. With support from the Astray Foundation, an improved second stage G8TX series was created. A mobile suit designed for underwater combat was based on the mobile suit named the Forbidden in the series. This was the Forbidden Blue. The Forbidden Blue is classified as a test-type mobile suit. It was now designed for actual combat deployment. Its most notable feature is the Panzer. On the original Forbidden, this equipment was used to alter the trajectory of beam weapons. The Forbidden Blue uses it to gain underwater combat capability. Its functions are concentrated in parts called armor arrays, which are located on the left and right sides of the body. The Panzer controls water molecules and reduces water pressure. It also reduces the friction generated between the body and the water. This allows it to travel at speeds of up to 100 knots. In the Cosmic Era universe, there are hardly any weapons for which the underwater cruising speed is clearly specified. Therefore, it is unclear how it compares to other weapons in terms of speed. However, it is known to be around 5 times faster than real-world submarines. For the Earth Alliance forces, who had been fighting with outdated warships, the Forbidden Blue's cruising speed of 100 knots was undoubtedly a revolutionary development. As I mentioned earlier, the Forbidden Blue's standout feature is its underwater combat capability using the Panzer. However, this function has one weakness. When the battery runs out of energy, the Panzer stops functioning. If the anti-water pressure device stops working, the Forbidden Blue is unable to nullify the effects of water pressure. If it is operating in the deep sea, its body will be destroyed immediately. Fans often ask why it is they create such a defective weapon. The Earth Alliance development team was foolish. However, the Forbidden Blue is not necessarily a defective mobile suit. In the MSV story, it states that because it was only a prototype, the weakness was overlooked. In other words, as it was a test machine, not intended for actual combat deployment, the Astray was not considered a flaw. There is also an episode in which the test pilot refers to the Astray, the fact that it immediately collapses when its energy runs out, by calling it the Forbidden Coffin. What if we interpret this nickname to mean that deploying it in combat is forbidden? The official story never describes its reason for being created as being to serve as a reckless, defective weapon. However, there is one description that bothers me. The sentence, because it was a test machine, its flaw was overlooked, has a continuation. Let's look at the full sentence. It says that under the pretext that it was a test machine, its flaw was overlooked. The word pretext is very interesting. It gives the impression of a lie used to force the plan forward. In fact, the Forbidden Brew was later deployed in combat. Despite its flaw having been ignored on the grounds that it was a test machine, it was deployed in combat. This is an extremely serious logical contradiction. There is no explanation whatsoever as to why this decision was made. In the story, the Earth's Alliance forces often carry out operations that abandon their own allies to die. It is possible that the Forbidden Brew was operated based on that kind of thinking, but the truth is completely unknown. Let's take a look at its other features. The original Forbidden thrusters were replaced with ones that emphasize underwater use. Consequently, it lost the ability to fly through the air. A tail-like part was also added to the backpack. This part is called the tail extension. This combines and houses functions such as an anchor to stabilize the body underwater, an ultra-long-wave antenna, and sonar. During the design stage, there was also a plan to rotate the tail extension at high speed to provide propulsion. This plan was known as the Silent Propulsion System proposal. While the details are unclear, it appears that, compared to a thruster, it could generate propulsion with an extremely low noise output. However, this function was omitted by the time the Forbidden Brew's design was finalized. The backpack and the overall sensors were both modified for underwater use. It is equipped with Lorenzini sensors, which are based on the sensory organs of marine life such as sharks and rays. It also has various other high-performance sensors and a high-speed information processing system. Thanks to this technology, the Forbidden Brew can provide the pilot with good visibility underwater. It is also equipped with trans-phase armor, a feature of the second stage GATX series. Thanks to the improved energy efficiency of the trans-phase armor, it is possible to operate special devices such as the Jesh Mighty Panzer. However, this point may be open to debate. Trans-phase armor is a system that only consumes energy when an impact is applied to the armor. By contrast, the phase shift armor that it is based on constantly consumes energy. Conversely, while phase shift armor has high energy consumption, it constantly increases the strength of the armor. The Astray Gundam gains underwater combat capability through the performance of its phase shift armor. The Astray Gundam can continue to fight at depths at which Zaftgun would be unable to withstand the water pressure and would collapse from even minor damage. By the time the Astray Gundam was completed, it had already achieved an effective level of underwater combat capability. However, the amount of time that the Astray Gundam fought underwater was limited. It is likely that it could only operate for a limited time, not long enough to participate in military operations centered on underwater activity. A mobile suit based on the Forbidden Brew was later formally adopted. This was the deed forbidden. Unlike the forbidden blue, the deed forbidden did not collapse and kill the pirate if its energy ran out. It adopted pressure-resistant titanium alloy armor around the cockpit. However, some people may still have questions after hearing this explanation. After OLED only added pressure-resistant armor around the cockpit, there is no description in the deed forbidden settings stating that the cockpit becomes an escape capsule. No further information is provided. In any case, if its energy runs out, the pilot's chances of survival would be slim. At first glance, the fact that the pilot dies if the jet Panzer stops functioning seems like a major flaw. But isn't this essentially the same as if the life support system of a spacesuit stops and the person wearing it dies? The flaws of the Forbidden Blue are a topic that lends itself to much debate. Now let's take a look at the Forbidden Blue's armaments. First up is the Vulcan gun on the head. This is the same weapon that was equipped on the original Forbidden. Next are the machine guns mounted on the arms. These are also the same as those on the original Forbidden. These two types of ranged weapon were designed with the assumption that they would be used in combat after surfacing from underwater. In other words, firing them underwater was not anticipated. In games and similar media, however, they can be used underwater, but only to make the game more enjoyable. The muzzles are equipped with waterproof caps that operate automatically. When operating underwater, these caps prevent water from entering. Next is the Gundam metal cannon. This weapon is mounted in the same place as the beam cannon on the original Forbidden. It is a sonic weapon and works on a different principle to a beam cannon, which uses plasma. In the Astray story, the Gundam metal cannon is used in a scene set on land. The Sword Calamity, piloted by ace pilot Edward Harrison, is fighting the Forbidden Blue. The Sword Calamity dodges the Gundam metal cannon's attack. This scene shows that the cannon has enough attack power to make it choose to dodge it. Apparently, it is capable of demonstrating attack power at a fully practical level even on land. Next is the torpedo pod. This equipment can be mounted on the backpack, and various warheads can be selected depending on the objective. In the Astray story, there are scenes where this equipment is used on land. Apparently, it can be equipped with missiles as well as torpedoes. The supercreating torpedo is a notable example. It is a weapon that wraps the torpedo in a bubble of air. This bubble absorbs detection sound waves, such as sonar. This makes it an extremely serious threat to weapons that detect and defend against torpedoes using sonar. Furthermore, the air reduces water resistance, enabling it to travel underwater at speeds above the speed of sound. While it may not make much of an impression compared to other weapons, it is an extremely terrifying weapon. Next is the Trident. Designed for close-range melee combat, it is equipped with 3 blades. Protrusions at the tip make it difficult to pull out once it has pierced something, giving it an unusual shape. The reason for these protrusions isn't clear. While its appearance gives the impression of something disposable, the truth remains unknown. In the Astray story, there is a scene in which the trident is swung like a sword and used to destroy the cockpit of an enemy mobile suit. Next are the spikes. These are protrusions installed on the jet Panzer. Their attack power is not described. Perhaps they achieve high attack power by ramming them into the enemy at 100 knot speeds. However, these spikes also have protrusions that make them difficult to pull out. The purpose of these protrusions is open to each one's interpretation. Next is the Nidhogg. It is described by the same name as the Sith equipped on the original Forbidden Nidhogg. It is stored inside the Jeshmitic panzer in a way that follows the curved surface of the armor. Once the braids have been deployed, the base moves forward to form a scissor-like shape. If it has the same attack power as the weapon on the original Forbidden, it is an incredibly powerful weapon. The Nidhogg has enough destructive power to cut off a battleship's bridge and base. Seeing 4 of these being used at the same time would truly be a nightmare. This weapon is also used in Astray. It can easily destroy the head of an enemy mobile suit. As it is mounted on the Jeshmitic panzer, it can be used while the arms are in use. This enables the Forbidden Brute to destroy multiple enemies at close range simultaneously. There is also a high possibility that the Jeshmitic panzer's defensive power has been improved, although this is not clearly described. The Jeshmitic panzer on the original Forbidden is damaged when a beam boomerang collides with it. However, the Forbidden Brute's Jeshmitic panzer successfully defends against the anti-ship sword used by the Sword Calamity. It continues fighting without taking any damage. However, there is no clear description stating that it has been strengthened. Defense by the Jeshmitic panzer also seems to be effective only on the surface of the armor. It appears that no defensive field is generated on the reverse, and there is a scene in which the Sword Calamity destroys its base. That is the Forbidden Brute's weaponry. Although it is an underwater mobile suit, it can demonstrate sufficient compatibility on land if an ace pilot controls it. As I have mentioned several times, there is a scene in which it fights the Sword Calamity. Ultimately, it loses its weapons and is effectively defeated, but the fact that it puts up such a good fight against the Sword Calamity, which excels in close-range melee combat, is commendable. Finally, let's discuss the mysteries surrounding the Forbidden Brute's pilot. The pilot, who is best known for using it, is Jane Houston. She's a female pilot in the Earth Alliance Navy. Due to her brave and fierce fighting style, she was feared as an ace pilot and given the nickname White Whale. After her comrades were wiped out by an underwater mobile suit unit led by Satsuma-Mosim, she swore revenge. She then took part in the Alliance Force's underwater mobile suit development plan. The result was the Forbidden Brute. According to Deep Story, the Deep Forbidden, the officially adopted machine, was completed after the Forbidden Brute. The following sentence is especially noteworthy. It states that Jane returned to the battlefield as a pilot of the Deep Forbidden. Jane returns to the battlefield as the official pilot of the Deep Forbidden. However, when she first appears in the story, she is the pilot of the Forbidden Brute. Why is she piloting the Forbidden Brute, which was only a prototype not intended for actual combat deployment? There is no clear reason written anywhere. Of course, the reason in the real world is easy to guess. It is because the story becomes more exciting if she pilots a Gundam-type machine and plays an active role. But that interpretation is far too uninteresting. Jane is a soldier from the Atlantic Federation, one of the nations that make up the Earth Alliance. While it is allied with the Eurasian Federation, another member nation of the Earth Alliance, the two are effectively hostile towards each other. It is possible that as part of a political conflict, they harassed her by giving an impractical prototype to an ace pilot. But the truth is unknown. Following During the war, Jane is sent to capture Edward Harrison, an Earth Alliance deserter. However, she reconciles with Ed during the battle and leaves the Earth Alliance. Ed and Jane had originally been lovers. Another interpretation becomes possible. If we unknow it based on this fact, they may have tried to avoid giving a useful weapon to someone who had the potential to betray them. Afterwards, Jane cooperates with Ed and participates in the South American War of Independence. Towards the end of the war, Jane finds herself in a desperate situation while fighting a unit of the forbidden machines. Just as a large number of Super Cartesian torpedoes are about to take her life, they suddenly explode. It was a unit of goons who saved Jane from this crisis. Zaft forces had arrived as reinforcements to support South America's independence. Jane's lover and her new homeland were saved by Zaft's underwater mobile suits, the same kind of machines that had once taken her comrades from her. Thus, Jane and the Forbidden Bruise battle came to an end. That concludes today's research. Thank you for watching until the end. I'll see you again in the next episode.